We will now create an occlusion pass. So we're going to go back to our master layer here, and we'll select only the geometry we need, which is FAA and the background here. And we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this OCC. And because this occlusion layer registers only black and white, and we want to make all of the light pixels transparent, we will change the mode to multiply, so only the dark pixels are composite on top of the key light and the beauty pass. So what I will do is I will now go to indirect lighting, and I'm going to turn off final gather, because like we said before, we use the render layers to optimize the speed, and by turning off final gather, this will make the rendering of the occlusion pass a little bit faster. And final gathering won't actually add to the quality of the occlusion, but by separating the occlusion pass, it also gives us flexibility, because we can make it darker or lighter based on the transparency in a compositing program. And we can even adjust the levels later on, or the curves. So now that we have this, we need to add the occlusion defaults. So we right click and we click on attributes, and you see here the attribute editors, and there are a lot of different options and overrides, but we're just going to go straight to the preset, and we have an occlusion preset, which is decent. And you can look here by clicking on that little arrow. We now have an option to get into the parameters of the occlusion. So if we want to change the max distance to be 12, we could, but for now we're just going to leave it at the defaults. We go back here, so we have the occlusion. Now we can render all three of these together, and we'll see how this will be composited on top of the key light and the beauty pass. Now, in some instances, we'll notice that the beauty pass already has occlusion added to it. So sometimes if you already have occlusion, you wouldn't want to add occlusion on top of occlusion. But when we get to the compositing stage in Photoshop, because these are still images, I'll explain how this occlusion pass can be used so that we can change our background as we wish. And again, this just allows us more flexibility, because sometimes the background might change, or sometimes we need to be able to add a little bit more of a shadow in there just to make it feel like it fits within the background scene a little bit more. So it gives us flexibility. So it's pretty much the default render layer that everybody renders out. And what's important is, if you notice, it takes a very long time to render this occlusion layer out. So if you have an animated scene and the animation is approved, you can render out the occlusion pass, and then later on you can add in the lights and the color, and that occlusion pass won't need to be rendered out again, so you'll be able to work in a lot faster way, because you'll only be rendering out the key light or the beauty or other lights that you add to the scene. And we can see how this is now composited together, and it makes it quite dark. In fact, it's too dark, but it gives us an idea. So this is this one. If we compare it to this one actually looks better, and this actually has some occlusion from the beauty pass, but this gives us an example of how the occlusion pass works.